I don't give much credence to the idea that the moon has an influence over our behavior, but if Jason's in the hospital and I have the flu and someone else falls down and there's an eclipse at this, you gotta wonder. You just gotta wonder. In fact, that's one of the sources of things that we call magic and superstition, is they're looking for answers to misfortune. And sometimes there are none. We live in a world that's freighted with mystery at every moment. And one of the things we can do is acknowledge that the world is moving in ways we cannot perceive. And at best, we can stand to one side and not be rolled over if we get a moment's notice. I'd like to give you a couple of passages to keep in your head before I speak at length today. And I don't mean at length, I mean in a long way before I move into the narrative. One of them is from the Gospel of Luke, which was being read today in Christian churches. It's part of a story in chapter 19 in which Jesus is said to enter Jericho and was passing through it, and there was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see Jesus, but on account of the crowd he could not because he was short. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him because he was going to pass that way. Keep that passage. We'll store it and use it a little later. In the book of Proverbs, from which I read a few weeks ago about wisdom, I'm going to reprise that passage and push it a little further on. It says, "Happy is the one who finds wisdom and the one that obtains understanding, for the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies, and all the things thou can desire are not to be compared with her. Length of days is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay upon her, and happy is the one who holds fast." Now, these last moments, you noticed, it said the tree of life. She is the tree of life, meaning the wisdom. Every Saturday in the synagogue, when they return the scrolls of the Torah back to the compartment, the ark as it's called, they sing a song that embodies these words. It's Chayim hi lamachat tzikim ba. She is a tree of life for all who hold her close. And it is the most poignant moment in the service because you are returning the source of your wisdom to its state, but you are reluctant to do that. And so you sing a song of farewell to the thing that is most precious to you. And the words they sing, it's Hayim hi lamachat tzikim ba, a poignant Hebraic minor mode. We sing a different version here at early worship. She is a tree of life, and all who hold her strengthened be. Do you have a tree of life to which you hold? I want to talk about the tree of life later. You know, I've already told you I've been sick most of the week. I still am. I'm getting sicker by the moment as my ibuprofen fades into the background. Of course, once the worst of the illness is gone, and it was pretty crummy, you actually do reflect on it, or you can. And one of the things I'm bringing to the pulpit this morning is a remembrance, very immediate on Thursday and Friday, of how small your world becomes when your body doesn't work. Time is measured between doses, 2 hours, 4 hours. Space is the distance between you and the bathroom. That's as far as you want to go, but you don't want to be any further than that. And not just the diminished physical ability, but the diminished interest. I was not interested in anything other than breathing. And that took effort. Not because it was hard, but because everything else was annoying. I really had to focus all my effort on being alive. How different is that for most of our lives? And most of us here who day to day can rely upon our lungs, our hearts, our limbs, our innards to play fair. And how different are we from those who live with chronic disabilities of body, who have to use their brains to make their limbs do what little they can do, or with the disability of poverty that limits them to the next meal or the next corner, to the despair of a life that has no promise. How fortunate are we, and how much we need to remember how fortunate we are. I hope I can retain some fragment of that appreciation here and now, and that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. At the end of my first day walking in Spain, I was in the town of Portodiume. I had walked 18 miles that day, which even for someone who walks 7 or 8 miles a day is a long way to go. And my legs and feet hurt as much when I woke up as when I went to sleep. Now, if you don't know, I'm taking part of that walk to Santiago that medieval pilgrims made for generations. And you don't have to be a Catholic to go or to derive benefit. I started out in the port city of Ferrol in Galicia, where the Irish monks and the British saints would land, and walk the rest of the way. 110 kilometers, but since we've decided the metric system is only good enough for 98% of the world's surface, I'll translate that into miles. It's 12 miles a day on average, more some, less others. My first day started right at the jetty, the same jetty, at least physically, where the Spanish soldiers got onto the Armada to invade England, and we all know how that turned out. And I finished my day in the little town of Portodiume, situated on a hillside across from the Ria de Ares. I started my day walking through the town, a lovely medieval town, the kind that you think ought to be in postcards. And I would have taken more pictures, except that I kept walking through them every day, one village after another. They became commonplace and obvious. Yet another medieval village with yet another charming plaza, ho and hum. But this one was on a hill, all of it. And my legs already hurt, and my first task was to climb a hill. It was lovely to see the narrow streets, the plazas, the jutting bay windows, the statues here and there. But within 1 kilometer, I'm already knowing this is going to be another hard day. And halfway up to the road on the right, I see a road going off to the right, going off to a place my guidebook says is well worth the trip, San Miguel de Braeme. A 12th century church. Ooh, 12th century, I should go there. It's only 3 kilometers away. A kilometer going uphill reminds me that I have to go 2 more uphill and then repeat the task coming down. So I looked out at the bay and thought how lovely it was, took a picture of a pomegranate tree and went back to my original path. But the trouble was, having turned off the path, I lost my way and was another mile up the hill before a woman saw me with my backpack, my walking stick, and my definitely not Spanish face, and reminded me that the path was a mile back where I had come from. So now I had to go back again, and now wondered where was the path in the first place. I was looking for the scallop shell. None was to be found. I had my guidebook open. It made no sense. And then, saints be praised, another woman saw me in my distress, pointed down at the street, and I saw the yellow arrows spray painted here and there. I thanked her gratefully and resumed my path up yet another hill. I learned that whenever I came to a crossroads in Spain and I did not know which way to go, if one of the ways was uphill, that was the way I had to go. It was an unfailing rule all the way to Santiago. Gradually, the town receded from view and the farms began to appear. And at the top of the hill, another mile along the way, I see a brightly painted house. It's painted white and blue, almost garish amongst all the cream and stucco-colored houses. And it has an arbor for a front porch. And across the arbor are growing, well, it's a fruit tree. It's a pear tree that is spread through the arbor like a espalier. And then there's something else. What is it? And the man comes out and greets me in Spanish. No, in Galician, which is even more remote than Spanish. And I tell him in bad Spanish what a magnificent house it is and ask him about the fruit. Kiwi, he says. The medieval Spanish farmer now grows kiwi fruit amongst his pears. The path takes me around behind his house, through his orchard. An orchard filled with apple trees. The apples are so commonplace they just drop on the ground. They fill the gutters and dam up the water from last night's rain. I go past other trees. I see lemon trees. I see limes and lemons growing on the same tree, the product of grafting. All day long I see trees hung heavy with fruit, falling on the ground that no one is eating because they're just there. And then when I'm in the woods, you'd think I wouldn't see trees yielding up fruit, but I encounter the Castanea sativa. I learned that just this week so I could sound important to you. It's the technical name for the Spanish chestnut. It yields a fruit that comes in an ugly green chartreuse spiny husk that falls on the ground, and if you try to pick it up, it hurts your fingers. But then it bursts open like a science fiction movie would have a monster inside. But inside, instead, is a chestnut with that beautiful brown husk. And they're all over the path. For miles I see them strewn as though somehow the largest chestnut tree on the planet had all given up every one of its fruit right there in Galicia. I'm squashing them underfoot. Periodically I see old women with long sticks poking at them so they can get them free and put them in bags to take home to roast. This is a day of trees. Of fruit trees and nut trees, of sycamores and birches. It is a day in which cypresses and eucalyptuses surround me. Every house has a fruit tree or two, usually apples, but sometimes pears, and I want so hard to pluck one, but that's not what I'm there to do. When I get away from the farms, it's when I see the chestnuts, or the eucalyptus, or the sycamores. You know the word castanea that represents chestnut? You can hear the word chestnut in it, castanea, but it's also the wood from which we make castanets. It is the most Spanish of trees. They still roast them over open fires, you know. That season won't be long in coming. I picked up one and I put it in my pocket. But after a while, there were so many I didn't know if I should do even one. And then I thought of Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman wrote a wonderful passage I read years ago in which he writes, I find letters from God dropped in the street, and I leave them right where they are, for I know wherever I go, others will punctually come forever and ever. I knew that for the rest of the week I could find a chestnut in a moment. The abundance of the earth was being dropped in front of me from the trees around me. Among the curiosities of Scripture is the story told about Zacchaeus. Why do we have to know he was short? So that we know he climbed a tree. Why do we have to know he climbed a tree? So that Jesus could see him in the tree and invite himself to his house. Because that's what it says when Jesus notices Zacchaeus. He says, come down, I'm staying at your house today. And the people around grumbled because he was short, rich, and unpopular. Why would Jesus hang with an unpopular person? But we all know that Jesus always was a bad chooser of company. He always ended up with people who would either be in jail now or later. I've always had a soft spot for Zacchaeus because not far from the little townhouse where I was 5, there was a pine tree of about 50 feet tall, and the kids in the neighborhood used to climb it all the time. I tried to climb it, but I was frightened that if I got too far up, I might fall, and the thought of falling and being hurt was more daunting than the thought of climbing up to the top. And there came a day when we were moving to a new place, and there would be no more moments when I could climb that tree. And it was a day very, very like yesterday, when it was gray and misty, and none of the kids were out there playing. And so I went out while they were packing the house. I was by myself and stood at the bottom of the tree and resolved to climb to the very top. And I did, one branch after another, until I stood at the top of this tree, the first tree I had ever climbed entirely to the top, and could behold the neighborhood from a lofty perch and make out the automobiles in the parking lot and the other trees, and had this wonderful vista all to myself. And the funny part was I didn't feel the least at risk. No danger at all. The tree was holding me quite wonderfully.